The moment everyone feared almost happened. Iran's biggest maritime strategy was already in motion. And for a few critical hours, global shipping stood on the edge of collapse. Because this time, Tehran wasn't bluffing. Their plan was bold, fast, and potentially devastating. Control the choke point of global oil and force the world to react. The target was the narrow waters of the Strait of Hormuz, a passage where nearly 1/5 of the world's oil supply moves every single day. And Iran knew even a temporary disruption could send shockwaves through markets. So they moved quietly. Under the cover of darkness, fast attack craft began repositioning near key shipping lanes. Coastal radar units shifted to active monitoring mode. Unidentified small vessels appeared near tanker routes. Then, the first signal. Commercial ships slowed their transit. Insurance alerts were issued. Satellite tracking showed abnormal clustering near the northern shoreline. Iran's biggest plan had begun. At first, it worked. Several tankers changed course. Shipping companies issued emergency advisories. Energy analysts warned of a possible supply shock. But then, something unexpected happened. Instead of immediate airstrikes, the U.S. Navy stayed silent. No missiles. No bombers. No dramatic announcements. Just movement beneath the surface. And that's when Phase 1 began. Unmanned patrol vessels, small, fast, and nearly invisible on radar, entered the strait. These weren't ordinary drones. They operated autonomously, scanning for mines, tracking suspicious boats, sharing live targeting data. Within hours, a moving digital shield formed across key corridors. Iranian swarm boats suddenly found themselves exposed. Every maneuver, tracked. Every turn, recorded. But this was only the beginning. Because while these robotic vessels monitored the surface, something far more powerful was assembling beyond the horizon. A U.S. carrier strike group shifted position. Destroyers aligned along strategic angles. Electronic warfare aircraft launched quietly into the night. And then, the escalation began. Radar interference spread across coastal regions. Iranian tracking systems flickered. Communication relays experienced sudden disruptions. This wasn't kinetic warfare yet. It was something more calculated. Electronic dominance. Within minutes, Iranian command units struggled to coordinate swarm tactics. Fast boats began operating blind. Their biggest advantage, surprise, disappeared. But Washington wasn't finished. Because Phase 2 was already underway, long-range surveillance aircraft detected movement near concealed coastal launch sites. Missile batteries, previously hidden, were preparing to activate. That's when the order came. U.S. Navy destroyers launched precision-guided cruise missiles. They flew low over the water, hugging the terrain, avoiding detection. The targets were strategic. Coastal missile depots, command bunkers, radar relays. Seconds later, explosions lit up the shoreline. Iran's layered defense network began to crack. But even after these strikes, the threat remained. Small fast boats, dozens of them, still moved through narrow channels. And these vessels, armed with rockets and explosives, were designed to overwhelm larger ships. That's when the U.S. deployed its most feared maritime counter. Low-altitude strike aircraft entered the airspace. Flying slow, almost hovering. Watching. Waiting. These aircraft weren't designed for speed. They were built for persistence. Their cannons, capable of shredding small vessels in seconds, locked onto targets. And one by one, swarm boats disappeared from radar. However, the real turning point was still coming. Because while the sea battle unfolded, intelligence revealed something critical. Iran's biggest plan wasn't just about boats. It relied on hidden coastal launchers capable of striking ships hundreds of kilometers away. And those launchers were about to become the next targets. The crisis was escalating minute by minute. Markets reacted. Shipping routes shifted. Military assets poured into the region. The world watched, holding its breath. But the decisive move had not yet happened. And what came next would determine whether Iran's biggest plan was completely blocked or only delayed. The situation was now entering a far more dangerous phase. Because even though swarm boats were being neutralized, Iran still held its most powerful card: hidden missile launchers along the coastline. These systems were designed for one purpose: strike tankers, and shut down global shipping in minutes. And intelligence confirmed they were being prepared. Mobile launch trucks moved into concealed mountain positions. Radar units powered on. Command signals increased. Iran was preparing for a decisive escalation. But then, the US made its boldest move yet. Instead of targeting boats or surface vessels, Washington shifted focus inland. Stealth aircraft entered the operational zone. Flying high, almost invisible to radar. Their mission was precise: destroy hardened launch facilities before missiles could be fired. Moments later, precision-guided, bunker-penetrating munitions were released. These weren't ordinary bombs. They were designed to punch through reinforced rock, concrete, and underground tunnels. Seconds after impact, massive shockwaves rippled through coastal mountains. Underground storage depots collapsed. Missile tunnels filled with debris. Iran's long-range anti-ship capability began to crumble. But even this wasn't enough. Because intelligence warned of a second layer of defense. Mobile radar relays scattered along the coastline. These units could guide missiles even if primary systems were destroyed. So the US executed Phase 3. Electronic warfare aircraft jammed radar frequencies. Simultaneously, naval aircraft launched precision strikes on mobile relay vehicles. Within minutes, Iran's targeting network went dark. Missile systems without guidance became useless. However, the crisis wasn't over. Because mines, possibly already deployed, still threatened shipping lanes. And this is where the US Navy introduced something new: autonomous mine-hunting drones. These small robotic vessels scanned the seabed. Using sonar mapping, they detected suspicious objects. Then, neutralized them remotely. One by one, potential hazards disappeared. Shipping lanes slowly reopened. But something else was happening. Allied nations began moving assets into the region. European naval vessels announced support operations. Mine-clearing units prepared deployment. Air patrol rotations increased. This was no longer just a US operation. It was becoming a coalition response. And that changed everything. Because Iran now faced not one navy, but a growing international presence. However, Tehran still had asymmetric options: small drone boats, hidden launchers, remaining fast attack craft. And intelligence suggested some units had retreated to secondary ports. That's when the US executed its most decisive maneuver. Carrier-based aircraft launched continuous patrol cycles. Helicopter gunships monitored coastal waters. Destroyers repositioned to block escape routes. The strait was now under layered control. Surface drones, air patrols, electronic warfare, precision strike capability. Iran's biggest plan was being dismantled piece by piece. Shipping confidence began to return. Oil markets stabilized. Transit requests increased. But the risk still remained. Because even weakened, Iran could still attempt smaller disruptions. And that uncertainty kept military forces on high alert. The operation had prevented immediate closure. But long-term stability was not guaranteed. The world now faced a new question. Did the U.S. Navy permanently block Iran's biggest plan? Or was this only the first battle in a much larger confrontation? The answer may depend on what happens next. And, right now, the region remains one of the most dangerous flashpoints on Earth. But the calm that followed felt uneasy. Because history had shown, the Strait of Hormuz never stays quiet for long. Even after the destruction of missile depots, even after swarm boats were neutralized, even after mine-clearing operations began, Iran still had options. And Washington knew it. Satellite imagery revealed movement at secondary naval facilities. Smaller ports along the coastline suddenly became active. Fuel trucks arrived. Communication antennas were repositioned. Iran was adapting. Instead of large formations, they shifted to dispersed tactics. Smaller groups. Shorter movements. Harder to detect. And this raised a dangerous possibility. A sudden, unpredictable escalation. So the U.S. Navy adjusted again. Destroyers moved closer to key transit corridors. Carrier aircraft increased patrol frequency. Early warning aircraft began round-the-clock monitoring. The goal was clear. Prevent any surprise attempt before it could begin. But then, intelligence picked up something unexpected. Iranian drone activity. Not airborne, but maritime. Small unmanned surface vessels, moving slowly near shipping lanes. These drones, cheap, expendable, and difficult to track, posed a new threat. And this is where the situation became even more dangerous. Because these drone boats could carry explosives. They could target tankers. Or simply create panic. So the U.S. responded immediately. Helicopter patrols were redirected. Naval guns locked onto suspicious contacts. Autonomous drones began shadowing Iranian unmanned vessels. One by one, the drones were intercepted. However, the psychological impact had already been felt. Shipping companies remained cautious. Insurance premiums stayed high. Transit speeds remained slow. The strait was open, but fragile. And that's when the final layer of the operation began. A coordinated multinational deployment. Allied mine-clearing ships entered the region. European surveillance aircraft joined patrols. Additional naval escorts began accompanying commercial tankers. This created a convoy-style security network. Ships no longer traveled alone. They moved under protection. This dramatically reduced risk. But it also signaled something bigger. The crisis had evolved from a regional standoff into a global security operation. And Tehran noticed. Iranian media statements shifted tone. Officials warned of continued resistance. Military commanders hinted at asymmetric responses. The tension was far from over. Because even with weakened capabilities, Iran still possessed tools. Hidden stockpiles. Mobile drone units. Coastal rocket batteries. None of these could close the strait entirely. But they could disrupt it. And disruption was enough to keep markets nervous. Meanwhile, U.S. naval forces maintained constant readiness. Radar systems scanned every movement. Fighter jets remained armed on carrier decks. Destroyers tracked even minor vessel activity. The message was unmistakable. Any new attempt would be met instantly. Gradually, shipping traffic increased. From just a handful of vessels to dozens per day. Oil tankers resumed transit. Container ships followed. Energy markets stabilized. The worst-case scenario had been avoided. But analysts warned the strategic balance had changed. Iran's biggest plan had failed. The attempt to control global oil flow had been blocked. However, the confrontation revealed something deeper. Future conflicts in the strait would rely less on traditional fleets and more on drones, autonomous systems, and electronic warfare. And both sides had just tested these capabilities. The Strait of Hormuz remained open, but it had become a proving ground, a place where modern naval warfare unfolded in real time. So now the question remains: did the US Navy permanently stop Iran's biggest strategy? Or did this operation simply push the confrontation into a new, more unpredictable phase? Because one thing is certain: the next move could come without warning. And when it does, the world may once again find itself watching the strait minute by minute.